Great. Welcome to Senate Education. This is Thursday, February 22nd. We have the opportunity to hear from an elementary school student from Floodbrook Elementary, Zoe Olson. Why don't you come up, Zoe, and say hello to us? Come on up and sit in the chair for a minute. I met Zoe this morning. Her dad, I think many of us know, Oliver Olson. Please have a seat. And you don't want to sit, you want to stand, okay. And why don't you tell us what school you go to and what grade you're in and how things are going.
I go to Floodbrook and I'm in 5th grade.
And where is Floodbrook?
It's in London.
You run from London. Right. And tu parles français. Parce que ta mère, c'est une française. And Senator Gulick also speaks French.
For sure.
So is there anything you'd like to tell us about school or anything in particular that you're interested in telling the education committee?
No.
Nothing at all? What about cell phones? Do you have anything to say about cell phones in schools?
No, it's not a big deal, I guess.
You know,
They just use it during, well, sometimes people use it for like.
so in 5th grade, do you have a cell phone in your classroom?
No,
No,
they're like in our backpacks, we can only use them on the bus.
only using the bus. So when you come into school, where do you put them?
You just leave them in your backpack.
You leave them in your backpack. Yeah, please.
What about during your lunch break?
You can't have.
So they're in your backpack, in your classroom, and you're not allowed to use them. And what if you do use them?
I don't know, I think you might get a table for.
You might get some kind of, yeah. So is there anything as a 5th grader that you want us to focus on or be thinking about in terms of education?
I don't know, I feel like we shouldn't be allowed to play video games on computers.
Okay.
Cause we're really just using all our time like video games.
Okay. During the school day?
Yeah,
Sometimes? Okay.
during all the time. We do it a lot during library and
Okay.
math.
Is it free time where teachers saying, hey,
Yeah,
that's some free time?
but like, I kind of feel like we shouldn't, cause we're doing half the time in math, we're on our computers. Like, I get it's like a reward, but like, I feel like there should be like limits to that.
Okay. That seems to make sense, yes.
Do you have a favorite book?
No, I don't know what my favorite book is.
No, because we talk in here a lot about literacy and reading and such.
Yeah.
Curious.
I've got a lot of favorite books.
You have a lot of it.
Yeah, so technically they're not favorite books.
You like them all, right?
Great. Anything else? Yes, please. Senator.
So are you a good student? Do you have good grades?
Yeah.
Okay. You think that cell phones not being used in school would have an impact on that, on your good grades? I mean, are they distracting, you think?
No, I don't have one,
Okay,
so I don't know if it's not distracting. But sometimes me and my friend, she has a phone, and sometimes we play games on the bus, cause we're on the bus for a really long time, and it's not
right,
addictive.
thank you.
Do you have quelque chose en français, Senator Gulick? No? Okay.
Je suis enchantée de faire votre connaissance.
Oui.
Enchantée.
Et tu es bienvenue ici tout le temps, comme tu peux. OK? Une autre fois? OK. Merci. Bye-bye. Thank you, Zoe.
Future governor, right?
Future
there.
governor,
Future
indeed.
governor.
Yeah. Another future governor, Miss St. James.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Zoe. That was great.
Super.
So I asked Ms. St. James, we asked Ms. St. James, senators will recall either earlier this week or last week, probably earlier this week, to be in contact with the Imagination Library to help us understand whether or not the proposal put forward is feasible, what it would look like, what some of the expectations, I think, are of the Imagination Library. So we're going to do that, and then we will switch to a new draft of 284. So, Ms. St. James, thanks for joining us. Thanks for doing this behind the scenes work with the Imagination Library. Any information you have would be welcome.
Great, that's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. So I have a couple things for you today on S 303, which is where this language is currently living. I'm just pulling up your website here, so I refer to the right documents. So you should have,
4.1.
yes, so you should have draft 4.1, which has some changes to it, but not related to the Imagination Library.
Okay.
And then there's some, I drafted some language, some orphan language, some alternative language, and a full separate document that you have. Imagination Library, alt language draft number 1.1.
Beautiful.
You have that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I did have an opportunity to speak with Nora Briggs, the executive director of the Dollywood Foundation this morning. And basically there's kind of two ways we can go. One way is the way this bill is currently drafted, but even as the bill is currently drafted, which is on page 8, section 6. This would be kind of what I was referring to in my conversation with Ms. Briggs this morning as the state partnership option. And that requires, and I think this is where you perhaps need some testimony from the administration. In order for the state to be a state partner with Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, there needs to be a 501c3 that is set up solely for the purpose of this program. That can be a 501c3 that's created through this bill. You could direct a state agency to set up a 501c3, and it's a possibility to do that. Whether that's the right move is a different conversation. Or the state agency could partner with an existing 501c3, but that existing 501c3 then needs to agree to create a new 501c3 that is dedicated to just Dolly Parton's Imagination Library.
Sorry, yeah.
When you, the second part of your sentence was the state agency could also, you're talking about the state agency that we would have to form.
Yes. No, so my understanding is that, well, so the bill is drafted as it would be AOE, would be the state agency.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
Some states do it through their Department of Libraries. And I'm sure that there are other ways, but it's usually, my understanding is the library department or the education department. And no pilot program. They would not be interested in this being a pilot program. The Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, because this is what the bill is doing is creating a partnership between, so, and I know you all had this testimony and I watched it, but for some reason it maybe struck a more clear chord with me this morning. The cost of a book per child is $2.20, okay?
So just so I know, so the book itself.
The book itself probably costs about $16
Okay.
when you're looking at the cost of buying the book
Yeah.
and mailing it
Yes.
and whatever overhead is associated, okay? So
Okay.
probably, and this is from my conversation with Ms.
Yes.
The cost to the community partners is $2.20 per child per book. Okay,
And just so Dolly
pays
picks up
everything else.
everything else.
Correct.
The $2 and.
And so what was
Okay.
explained to me is part of the,
Senator Lewis, you wanna?
okay,
Does the 220 include
I'm getting there.
added
Okay.
positions, okay?
Yeah,
Isn't, we're,
Okay,
as you know,
I'm getting there.
intellectually
Getting there.
eager group.
let me talk.
I understand.
We knew it was gonna take a couple of years.
Knew that was coming.
We knew it was gonna take a second.
Okay, now we're
Now,
friends, all
now,
right.
scarf friend.
Excuse me.
Dinner off again.
Forget it.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Of course.
So, now I've lost my train of
That's not a
thought.
policy
So,
question.
220, okay, 220, okay.
220.
So, the way it was presented to me, and I think you all heard this testimony and it's been in the written materials, but again, it really, for some reason this morning really sunk in, is Dolly Parton could fund all of this, right? So it's just free.
Yeah.
But part of the philosophy and the mission of this program is that there has to be some amount of buy-in from the local communities in order for the program to really be a part of the community, okay? That's philosophical policy, right? That 220, let's say we went with what's in S303 right now, Senator Starr's bill, the state partnership. That would be the state partnership paying $1.10. And then the local partners, whether that's a school district or a municipal or a public library, would still be on the hook for that other 110. So there would still be that, there's the state buy-in, but then there's still that requirement for the community buy-in. So even if we did special funds and we created the 501c3, local communities would still be required to fundraise or dedicate a certain amount of money to covering the other half of the 220, which is the state's share of the book per child. That would not cover a position at AOE, theoretically. That's for the book. Apparently what they usually recommend for states that are larger than us is 2 full-time positions at the 501c3 that is partnered with the state agency. But because of Vermont's size, she would be recommending 1 full-time position. And that position would be dedicated solely to this program. And I think what the vision is part of that is marketing and outreach and all of that. And all of that is going to come with the name Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. That's the state partnership level is what this bill is currently imagining, but it would need to undergo some changes to get rid of the pilot project piece, to do the 501c3 piece. And I think you've heard that the administration may have some concerns about some of that.
Too.
So if the state partnership route is the way you wanted to go, I would encourage you to hear those concerns, or at least ask me to reach out and staff those issues. I think some of them may be related to state contracting requirements, and that's a little out of my bailiwick, so I can't advise you on that today. But certainly if you took specific testimony on it, or I had specific conversations offline, I might be able to provide a little more guidance. But there's another option,
Great.
which is what this alternative language is meant to reflect, and I'm sure it needs work.
And yeah, and let me just say, first of all, thank you for doing all this. I, in my conversation, Chair of Appropriations, we know there are limited funds this year in particular. I could be wrong, but I don't see us putting a full-time position person on this. We have so many other needs in the agency. So I don't think it's gonna work. Okay. But if there's something else, like we dropped it, that maybe we could think about, that would be.
Okay, so this is an alternative
Okay.
based again on my conversation with Ms. Grace this morning. And I'll lead with, I don't know how to label it, but if we're not gonna do the state partnership, so what this language does is it creates a grant program at AOE.
Does anybody think, yeah, just to clear this, does anybody see a path forward for a state partnership at this point? I mean,
I was gonna ask you a question about
oh, please.
grants.
Yeah.
Could, the community could raise money by a grant.
Sure, communities can go out and raise money, if they were, and they're still required
And they
to.
are doing that right
Yes.
now. There
Yeah.
are communities in Vermont. I mean, the first question she asked me is, are you a part of this program? My community does not do that, right? But there are communities in Vermont that
Do.
do.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there are communities out there right now that are, whether that's an appropriation through their town, because it's a municipal or a private library or fundraising. School, I believe school districts can be partners, so I don't know if there are school districts out there that have this as a budget, I don't, there's lots of different scenarios. But what this alternative language does is it creates a grant
Wait, I
program.
think she wanted to say something before we.
I'm good, okay, thank you.
It creates a grant program that's run through AOE for school districts, SUs, or public libraries to cover the local matching costs associated with book gifting programs. And I have used the term book gifting programs because we are not allowed to use Dolly Parton's Imagination Library for a scheme like this. So, exactly, it's trademark. So we talked, she said so what she referred to this scheme as is the state expansion model. And she says some states, as they are gearing up and trying to figure out if the state has the capacity or is ready for a state partnership, they might try this state expansion process. And I think that has looked different depending on where folks are. But based on your conversations, last time we talked about this, what I've created is just a grant program that would be run through AOE. And so eligible recipients would be school districts, supervisory unions, public libraries that partner with book gifting programs for their local communities. The grants have to be used for book gifting programs that provide books free of charge to children from at least birth through age 5, but require some amount of local matching costs. And then the grants could be used by the eligible recipients to cover or supplement the local matching costs or fees associated with those book gifting programs. Now, what Ms. Briggs pointed out to me today, which I have no personal knowledge of, is there are other book gifting programs out there.
Yes.
So you can't use the Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, right? So if you created a grant program like this, there would potentially be other programs that communities are either currently supporting or that would approach communities and say, hey, let's partner together because you have access to this pot of state funds for your local matching for our book gifting program that is not Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, right? And so if your goal is to just get books in the hands of kids, this could do it. But if your goal is to create just a pot of money that would go just towards the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, this would not do that.
I mean, my gut is we want books in the hands of kids. I'm thinking in particular, kids, and I don't know how we would work this, but kids from communities that might not be able to afford books, less likely, we hear all the time that certain districts don't have, and we say, oh yeah, go get a grant, but they don't have any time or the energy or money to do a grant.
Well, and this would require a grant application to AOE.
To AOE, right. But they could make it so, yeah, maybe.
So
So
you
this
could,
will-
you could
please.
build, so I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
All I wanna do today is talk over everyone. Very,
No,
very sorry.
it's great.
You could build in the eligibility criteria, right? So
Yeah.
you could, they should prioritize, grant applicants from, and then you can build in that criteria. But I just wanted to highlight that this would be a big shift from just supporting the idea of a partnership with Dolly Parton's Imagination Library. Policy decision.
Yeah, Senator Hashim.
I was, to the point that you raised earlier, I agree with it, just, the way I'm seeing it is the underlying goal is just get books into the hands of kids and, you know, whether it's called the Dolly Parton Imagination Library or some other thing. I don't know that the child, the 7-year-old or however old they are, who's getting the book is necessarily, it's not really gonna make a difference to the kid, in my opinion. I don't mean that in a rude way to Dolly Parton, but,
For the record.
and yeah, for the record. But you know, the end goal is getting books out there, and I think opening the door to figure out the best type of program later on, I think makes sense.
Yes, thank you.
I just wanted to point out, we do have a nonprofit called Cliff that exists, and they've served 350,000 children, and they are in 425 towns in Vermont, New Hampshire. They've given away $10 million in new books. And they've been around 25 plus years. I think there's someone actually in the House of Representatives who works for Cliff as well. But it says Cliff has provided free and inspiring literacy programs and brand new books to under-resourced children up to age 12 in almost 85% of the communities in Vermont. So, and there may,
And New Hampshire and Vermont.
yeah, there may be others, but this is just one that I'm familiar with. So I just wanted to
No,
put
that's
that out
good to
there.
know.
And at the top, it says we have open grants, click here to learn more. So I know they're well respected, a well respected organization.
Where are they based?
This one is in Waterbury Center.
In CLIF, so.
Yep.
So if we have, as librarians, they say librarians coming in, it just makes sense, I think we gotta do is get this information out that it's available. I mean, it's such a good deal. As far as, and maybe if somebody just guided this thing out to the municipalities or the public libraries, that people probably don't even know about this.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. It's in some sections of the state, but not many. Could someone just start the sort of along Senator Williams' question? Does the Dolly Parton Imagination Library require a partnership with the state, or could just some person says, I'm gonna open this up.
A nonprofit,
Now,
yeah,
I'm gonna start a
yes.
nonprofit, I'm gonna do this is gonna be my,
And the $2.20 local matching funds would flow through that nonprofit. Man,
yes, please.
I will just say I drafted this, and again, we can change it as much as you like or as little as you like, but I drafted this just for eligible grant recipients to be school districts, supervisory unions, public libraries. So I did not put private nonprofits on here, but if you wanted to, you could certainly add, a local nonprofit that is created for the sole purpose of, or not the sole purpose of, but I just wanted to draw your attention to, yes, nonprofits eligible partner with Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, but the grant program that I drafted would not allow them to be recipients of the grant. But we can change that, that's policy.
When former Senator Hooker was here zooming in, they've started something right. Do we know, do they have started a little nonprofit to get it going? Like, I'm just thinking, if the folks in Rutland want to access money through a fund that we might create, do we know if they would be eligible?
It looks like the Rutland program is run through the Rutland Free Library.
Well, that's right. So they partner with the nonprofit, okay?
And then folks can sign up through the Rutland Free Library to get on the list to get a book.
So I think we should find out more about Cliff. Do you know who in the legislature is involved with Cliff by any chance? Janet Brown. Oh, she's great. Yeah, she's great. So Janet Brown. So we can ask her about it. Maybe and then we can sort of explore this a little bit more and see if we want to move in some direction. And I'll talk to Senator Starr. I know the agency's already talked to Senator Starr a little bit, and see if maybe this route, if it makes sense. Okay. Any other questions on this? So I do think it's safe to say, if we move in a direction, it's gonna be this.
Do you want me to put that in
I
the draft?
do, I do, yeah, yeah.
So for the record, I'm so impressed with Senator Starr's initiative.
Yeah.
I'd like this to get through just for him, because
I-
he would be so
I
happy.
appreciate
And I have a
that.
bill I want his support on. Next time it comes.
You could call it the Robert Starr Fund for, books,
Yeah.
yeah.
For the record.
For the record, no, I appreciate that, and it's, I did hear, maybe I misheard it, but there is something about having a book. Smelling the book, experiencing it.
I usually read it.
Hearing the page.
Right.
Going over. Sorry.
That actually helps that literacy process. But, okay, well, I'll talk to, Representative Brown. If anybody else sees her, feel free to reach out to her. Great. Okay, electronic devices, S-284. We have a new draft that I'd like people to consider. First,
1.1.
1.1. Please.
That's St. James Office of Legislative Counsel. You also have draft 1.1 of a strike all amendment to S-284.
I'm sorry, what's Briggs' first name?
Nora.
Nora. Okay. Fine, she was actually, did you see something about Dolly Parton?
Yeah.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
talk after this.
Okay.
She didn't text me. I wish she texted me. Please go ahead.
Strike all amendment to S-284. And this language is based on the conversation and the direction I'll gave you last time I was in committee with you, regarding just requiring AOE to develop a model policy on cell phone and personal electronic use, and then report back on what's happening. So that's all this S-284 was many pages, right? And now we're down to 3. So, again, I picked an arbitrary date. Please give me direction on the date, but on or before December 31st, 2024, Secretary of Education shall develop a model policy regarding the use of cell phones and other personal electronic devices in school. And then at a minimum, the policy has to address the following: the specific circumstances or time periods during which cell phone or personal electronic device use is permitted. And I should say, as I'm talking to you all now, I drafted this morning. It should probably be specific to students. So I will, if we move forward with this language, make sure that I add that in. My apologies.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
just,
did read in what's happening over in Great Britain, they actually do include the teachers
Oh.
in the,
do they,
Policy decision.
unless it's professionally related, they're not supposed to be on their cell phones either.
Then maybe it was a genius idea that I left it out to facilitate the policy discussion. I'll flag that as a policy decision pretty well. So when can you use cell phones? When can you not use cell phones? Now, I think there's an argument for if you say when you can't use them, it's obvious when you can use them, but perhaps it's not. So perhaps requiring the model policy to spell out both will help identify gaps that you wouldn't have identified had you only been thinking in the positive or the negative. Acceptable locations for cell phone and personal electronic device storage during the times when their use is prohibited. Can they just keep them in their backpacks? Do they have to have them in their locker? Consequences for violation of the model policy, including options for educators and staff to collect a cell phone or personal electronic device if a student is found violating the policy. Let's spell that out. What's the model policy on what that looks like? And on page 2, a process for parents or guardians to get messages to students during times when cell phone or personal electronic device use is prohibited. Let's just take away the confusion around what that would look like and spell that out. Then a reporting requirement, page 2, line 3, subsection B, on or before. Now, I know when we were talking about this, we were talking about coming back next year, but I don't know how you get data before next session.
Great.
If the policy's not even developed, and then you don't give school boards a chance to think about it, so on or before January 15th, 2026, we have to come back to you all with a written report regarding the prevalence and substance cell phone use policies adopted by school districts after the development of agency's model policy. And then the report has to include the following: information on how many school districts have adopted cell phone or personal electronic device use policies, and whether and how those policies differ from the agency's model. Because this bill does not require anyone to adopt a policy. It just requires AOE to create the model policy. So who's adopted a policy and how is it same as or different from the model policy? Information on how many school districts do not have a cell phone or personal electronic device, and any information as to why such policy has not been adopted at the time of the report, and recommendations for further legislative actions regarding this topic. You can certainly build in whatever you want into that report back. Is this what you were looking for? Start with
Yeah,
page
certainly,
two.
Yeah, please.
Should I get Liz Council's approval to ask a question?
I
Don't
think.
tempt me.
So I get that the first part of the proposed bill is about model policy. The second part is about who's got what, the summary report. And I'm not really sure where this fits in, but I'd like to know where some schools may be actually using cell phones, electronics for the purpose of academics versus, the two kind of polar extremes, prohibition versus, when it's allowed to be used. There's a middle ground where teachers may be encouraging students to use it for one reason or another. It would be useful to know that some folks have found kind of a middle ground. And I don't think it's in the model policy, maybe, but it's certainly in the data collection area. If that makes sense.
But you can spell it out, and when can you use it? You can use it for educational purposes, right?
Yeah, but I want to kind of draw that specifically. Not just like you use it during lunch, you can use it during whatever.
Oh, you want
Yeah,
to give some, you want in terms of the model policy, to give some examples of how you can use it around teaching, or do you want?
Essentially, I'm just like, it's not black and white. There's a middle ground that we just need to understand in the report
Yeah,
that, how it might be used as a tool in academics.
I was assuming they would put that in their model policy.
I'm assuming it too, but it's not written out, so
Yeah.
people may think black or white.
it's interesting. I talked to Senator Hardy a little bit. Her husband, Jason, was interested in this from the media literacy point. And I think that's kind of, again, if we're gonna be a 21st century education country, what did the media literacy look like in classrooms? How are they using it? So I may have him come in and actually say a few words, but I think that's kind of like he's getting at also.
So some visual arts teacher may be encouraging the students to use their cameras for video or whatever, it's part of the artistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if I respond or ask a question of my colleague, so the model policy shall address at a minimum the following: the specific circumstances or time periods during which cell phone or personal electronic device use is permitted. You don't think that would cover what you're?
Well, I think it does, but it doesn't call it out clearly enough that an educator in, in some small district, may just either think it's permitted as in, lunchtime or a school bus, that kind of permitted versus an academic pursuit.
I tend to agree that it might get lost if we don't pull it out a little bit more.
I guess I'm confused, because it seems like, so we're asking the Secretary of Ed to develop a model policy that will give specific circumstances and time periods when you can use your phone.
So, for
So in
example,
there, they would put for a media literacy lesson, for
right, but hang on. So, for example, page 1, line 13, instead of ending it at uses that are permitted, comma, for example, use for in academic purposes, something to that effect. Just spell it out, just a couple words. It'll get people like, oh yeah, teacher, Joe Schmuckatelli uses it in his visual arts class.
all right, yeah. I would think the AOE would do that, but that's maybe not. We could be explicit. Sure.
Goes back to the eighties when they came out with, handheld calculators. And everybody was up in arms about it because they weren't gonna learn how to do 1, 2, 3, so. But, you know, maybe in CTE, they may have an advanced calculator on their cell phone, which they do. iPhones do, that the CTE instructor allows them to use it, so. So those are the types of things that we can get into if we don't specify.
Interesting.
And I'd like to see the schools, as long as we're basically making this a study. I mean, you're doing.
Well, no, we're telling, yeah, I mean, we're telling them, again, if there are schools out there, we know there are a lot of pressures on schools and school boards and school districts. A model policy, here's something that hopefully will help you. And you can adopt it if you want, you could always change it, but this is a model policy, we hope it's helpful and I think talking about media literacy and what this could do as a tool, I think you said Senator Gulick, and I tend to agree, in 20 years, this could be this big, this could be, you know, who knows? So starting to think about that, yeah. Please.
I think it's great. I'm excited about this, and I think most districts want guidance and they want the help, so they're gonna be excited to have this model policy. So I just wanna say kudos to Ledge Council for your patience and drafting, and for you, and yes,
Yes.
good job. And I do think maybe we should spell out the student, because I don't think teachers want to be prohibited to use their phones. Just, we don't have to do what England is doing or Great Britain. So,
Well, in the meantime, the data is of what's going on in the world as far as lawsuits and all that stuff, that's gonna unfold in front of them.
Yeah.
And people are gonna become more aware of it. They may wanna put more restrictions.
So it sounds like we're leaving this on a very positive note with Senator Gulick's compliment around the table. Would love to close it there, and if anybody has anything negative to say or.
Got some concerns.
Great. I think, yeah. So,
2026. Time.
yeah,
yeah, they've got, they need the school year to actually collect this stuff, yeah. Okay, so, see if there are any concerns. Would you mind emailing this to the agency? And asking them if they have any concerns? Is that within,
I will do it, but I'll CC you.
beautiful, thank you.
Before we close on this, I will limit, I'm hearing limit bill to students, an oversight on my part. And I'm gonna add some specific language around, in the permitted uses, there need to be allowances for academic purposes. Do you wanna add anything to the data collection piece? For now? Or change it anyway? This is very bare bones.
Yeah.
I think you got it covered with, who's got a policy and how potentially the policies differ from the model policy.
Well, we can think about it and let you know.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, we have those questions.
And this is gonna be a standalone bill, we're not adding this, okay, great.
So we could always just take that one section, but we'll keep it as is for now. Yeah. Great. Anything else on this?
Not for me.
Okay, please, yeah. go ahead.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Recommendations for further legislative action regarding cell phone or personal. From whom would the recommendations be coming from, the AOE?
Yes.
Yeah.
So they, okay,
Yes, go ahead. I was just gonna say, you could, I mean, if Senator Gulick's interested, would you think he'd partner with Department of Health?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah.
And what were you gonna say, St. James?
I was just gonna say, for example, they could come back and say, we really think you need to require school districts to adopt this policy. Or, we really think that you need to adjust what the model policy needs to say. Or we think that we should have gone with the original bill to begin with, right? Like,
Right.
but I would encourage you to solicit that and ask for that rather than just hope that they bring that to the table. But I'll add something about partnership with the Department of Health for that last one.
Okay, Ms. Richter's